The morning begins long before the sun has properly risen, because a rat catcher in the heart of a medieval town cannot afford the luxury of oversleeping. The night always leaves behind new trails, new hiding places, and new signs of infestation that only reveal themselves in the pale blue hush before dawn. As you push open the crooked wooden door of your small, drafty dwelling, the cool air carries the familiar mixture of damp earth, old smoke, and the faint sourness drifting from the poorer districts, an odor that has become a constant reminder of the sickness threatening the streets. Your tools, slung over your shoulder in a worn leather satchel, jingle softly. Small wire cages, a wooden club darkened by years of use, loops of twine, a rusted hook for clearing debris, and a pouch of pungent herbs meant to mask the stench you encounter far too often. As you step into the alley, cats scatter, their green eyes glinting for a moment before vanishing into the shadows. The town is only beginning to stir, though the bakers' ovens have already awakened, belching their first warm breaths of fire into the cold morning. You hear distant coughing, persistent, wet, unmistakable, ever since the plague began creeping through the region. Even those who are not have grown anxious, whispering about bad omens and blaming vermin for carrying the invisible death. You, ironically, are one of the few who run toward the very source everyone else tries to avoid. Your first stop is always the marketplace. During daylight it is loud and bustling, but in these early hours it feels strangely hollow. Wooden stalls cast long silhouettes across the cobblestones, and the remains of yesterday's goods, crushed apples, broken tiles, bits of spoiled meat, provide an irresistible feast for the creatures you hunt. You move slowly, crouched low, scanning the spaces beneath crates and wagons. You check your small bait traps, set carefully the night before. Most are empty, but one contains a rat, curled and motionless, having succumbed to the herbal fumes you use instead of poison. You lift the trap with practiced ease, drop the carcass into a sack, and reset the mechanism with mechanical precision. As the sun finally peaks over the rooftops, the town begins to awaken in earnest. Merchants arrive to unload their wares, giving you uneasy looks as you pass. Some offer curt nods, reluctant respect for the dirty, necessary work you do, while others cross themselves or mutter that you bring misfortune simply by walking past. You do not blame them. Fear has become the town's morning ritual. Still you press on, following the signs most people never notice. Droppings near the well, tiny claw marks on the inside of grain sacks, odd corners of wooden beams. Every clue tells a story, and you have learned to read them with unsettling clarity. By mid-morning, your rounds take you toward the granaries near the town wall, one of the worst hotspots for infestation. The guards nod at you as they open the heavy doors, grateful that someone is dealing with the threat that jeopardizes their food supply and, by extension, their survival. Inside, the air is dry and heavy with dust. You kneel, spreading a handful of flour on the floor to check for fresh tracks. Tiny prints emerge almost immediately, leading toward a crack between two storage barrels. With your hook you pry them apart, just enough to reveal 3 pairs of glinting eyes. The rats scatter, and the chase begins swift, chaotic, echoing with the sound of barrels shifting and your boots thudding across the wooden slats. You catch 2, cornering them with a quick slam of a crate lid. The third escapes through a gap in the floorboards, leaving only silence behind. You exhale sharply, wipe your brow, and continue working. This is how the hours pass for a rat catcher, in motion and vigilance, in a strange dance between hunter and prey. And though fatigue builds in your limbs, and the smell of damp fur and dust clings stubbornly to your clothes, you know the day has only begun. The plague has made your role more important and far more dangerous than ever before. Each rat caught is a small victory against an enemy no one fully understands. A reminder that even in dark times, someone must face the shadows so others can breathe a little easier. The third day of the week arrives beneath a sky the color of damp parchment, a pale sun fighting its way through veils of morning mist. By the time you step outside your crooked timber-framed workshop, your sack of tools clinking softly at your side, The village is already stirring with unease. Rumors have spread like wildfire that the rat presence has grown bolder, pushing beyond granaries and kitchens into storerooms, bakeries, and even the lower galleries of the local monastery. For a medieval rat catcher such as yourself, this means not only more work, but also more danger. Where rats multiply, sickness is never far behind. As you make your way down the muddy path toward the marketplace, the stench of decay grows thicker, carried by damp winter air that has settled stubbornly into every corner of the settlement. Merchants are already setting up their stalls, but their movements lack their usual vigor. Several mutter prayers under their breath. One woman crosses herself when she sees you, as though your presence confirms her darkest fears. You have long grown accustomed to such reactions. Rat catchers are both a necessity and a reminder of ever-lurking catastrophe. But even so, the tension in the air sets your nerves humming. Before you reach the square, a breathless apprentice monk hurries toward you, his woolen robe flapping behind him like a frightened bird. Master rat catcher, he gasps, skidding to a halt on the slippery mud. The monastery urgently requests your help. The brothers discovered a nest beneath the west cellar. The scratching keeps them awake through their evening prayers. You nod, already sensing that this infestation will be worse than the last. There is something about the monk's pale face, the frantic way he clutches the wooden cross at his throat, that hints at horrors he cannot yet articulate. The monastery lies on a small rise overlooking the town, its stone walls streaked with moss, its windows narrow and watchful. As you step inside the cool, incense-scented halls, you are met with the chorus of whispers, some anxious, some angry, all heavy with expectation. The abbot himself greets you in the cloister garden. His lantern-jawed face and narrowing eyes give the impression of a man used to discipline, not fear, and yet his voice carries an unsteady tremor as he speaks. "They are bold," he says gravely, "too bold." They scurried across the chapel floor during lauds. Brother Paulus nearly crushed one with the holy psalter. You try not to smile. Monks often demand a gravity that daily life rarely respects. But the abbot's worry is real, and the danger greater than he perhaps allows himself to admit. Rats inside a holy house are more than a nuisance. They are an omen, a sign that divine favor may be slipping. He leads you to a narrow stairway spiraling downward, lit only by a few rattling torches. With every step, the air grows colder and more oppressive. The faint but unmistakable sounds of scratching, skittering, and chewing drift upward like a chorus of tiny nightmarish instruments. When you reach the bottom, the cellar yawns before you, a cavernous space of damp stone walls and long shadows where barrels of ale and salted meats sit stacked like silent sentinels. You kneel, press your ear against a barrel, and hear the unmistakable movement of a small colony inside. The rats have chewed through the staves to reach the fermenting grain. This is a dangerous sign. Where food goes, disease soon follows. With deft fingers, you set your tools in place. First your iron traps, sharpened and oiled, then your simple cages baited with stale bread. Finally your bundle of herb-soaked cloths and powders, capable of driving the pests into the open. As you work, your thoughts drift to the strange rhythm of your life. Most men in the village fear rats, but you have been living among them, studying them, hunting them, understanding their behavior like a hawk understands the flight of its prey, for so many years that you can almost predict their next move. After preparing the traps, you light a small cone of pungent herbs. Smoke curls up, thick and bitter, seeping into cracks and holes where rat eyes glitter from the darkness. They begin to emerge, hesitantly at first, then in urgent waves, gaunt bodies scrambling over one another in their desperate bid to flee the fumes. The monks recoil, some gagging, others clutching their rosaries. You maintain a steady hand, capturing as many as you can with swift, practiced movements. But you know this is only the beginning. This many rats could not have infiltrated the monastery in a single night. There must be a nest large, old, and deeply hidden. When the initial swarm dwindles, you begin the search for the heart of the infestation. You move through low archways, past dusty corridors lined with forgotten relics and broken candle holders. The monks trail behind you, their torchlight bobbing like weary stars. Beneath one loose stone slab, you find what you suspected. Tunnel. Narrow, foul-smelling, and scraped with the unmistakable marks of tiny claws. Remove this, you tell the monks. They hesitate. This part of the cellar has not been touched for decades, possibly centuries, but eventually they comply. You crawl inside first, gripping your lantern tightly as darkness swallows you whole. The tunnel is cramped and uneven, forcing you onto your elbows as you inch forward. The air is thick with rot. You hear the rats before you see them. Dozens, maybe hundreds, breathing, shifting, waiting. Against the flickering lantern glow, they resemble twisted shadows come alive, darting away into deeper tunnels carved by generations of unchecked breeding. You follow the sound until the tunnel drops into a hollow chamber, a place you suspect no human has set foot in for ages. There, illuminated by the trembling lantern light, lies the nest, a sprawling mound of straw, gnawed parchment, broken pottery, and scraps of cloth stolen from a monastery's laundry. In the center lies a huge, scarred alpha rat, its eyes reflecting red like burning embers. Its presence confirms your fears. This is not a new infestation. This is an established empire. Catching your breath, you steel yourself. The next steps are dangerous. Cornered rats bite hard and without hesitation. You carefully place your traps around the perimeter, laying your powders in strategic streaks. But before you begin the capture process, you pause, recognizing a chilling sight among the nest debris. A page torn from a sacred manuscript, chewed along the edges, flecked with droppings. To the monks above, this would not merely be a nuisance, it would be sacrilege. With renewed determination, you begin your work. It takes hours long, grueling hours filled with frantic movement, scraping claws, shrill squeaks, and the unnerving silence that follows each captured rodent. You sweat despite the cold, your lantern flickering dangerously as you maneuver between traps. Your hands shake from exertion, and the scent of decay threatens to overwhelm your senses. Yet slowly, methodically, you break apart the nest, remove the rats, and collapse the tunnels leading in and out of the chamber. When at last you emerge from the tunnel, filthy and exhausted but victorious, the monks gasp at the sight of you. The abbot clasps your shoulder with unexpected warmth. "You have saved us from a great calamity," he says, his voice hoarse with gratitude. "May God reward your courage. But you know better than to accept such praise wholeheartedly. This will not be the last infestation. The village is surrounded by forests, marshes, and old ruins, perfect breeding grounds. The rats will return, as they always do. You are merely holding back an inevitable tide. As you leave the monastery and walk back toward your workshop, the sun has begun to set, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold. The villagers nod to you with newfound respect. Some offer small coins. Others offer bread, cheese, or a place by the fire. You accept nothing but a small loaf. The work is its own reward, and you prefer quiet to praise. Night settles in, and with it comes the chorus of distant squeaks echoing through the narrow alleys of the village. You sigh, wipe your hands, and prepare your tools once more. Tomorrow, the hunt begins again. Night settles over the medieval town like a damp cloak, heavy, scratchy, and carrying with it the faint scent of smoke, sewage, and the countless scurrying lives hidden within the darkness. You, a professional rat catcher whose worth is measured in the bodies of vermin you present and the safety you offer to terrified households, step out once again into the labyrinth of narrow, twisting streets. The moon hangs low, pale and distorted behind drifting clouds, illuminating just enough to see the ground at your feet, but never enough to reveal what darts just beyond the edge of your vision. Your gear feels heavier at night. The leather pouch of bait, the iron traps, the long hooked staff with its sharpened end, and the reinforced sack you carry over your shoulder, already weighted with the spoils of the day. Every clink of metal seems louder in the silence. Every footstep echoes like a warning to the rats hiding in barrels, wood piles, and refuse heaps. You have learned, however, that rats do not fear noise. They fear hunger, and hunger makes them bold. Night is when the bolder ones emerge, You make your first stop at the bakery, where warm bread still lingers in the cracks of the stone floor, and the rats return like ghosts to a feast they believe is rightfully theirs. The baker, exhausted and covered in flour, lights a candle for you, his hand trembling as he explains that something large, much larger than usual, was dragging whole loaves off the shelves after dusk. You calm him with a nod and enter the storage room. The shadows stretch long and twisted, and for a moment, silence reigns. Then, you hear it, the rapid clicking of claws on stone. A chase begins. Your boots skid on flour dust as you lunge forward, staff raised. A sudden burst of movement erupts from beneath a crate, and you strike, cleanly, efficiently. The creature thrashes once before you scoop it into your sack. Another follows, and another, until the baker sighs with visible relief. He thanks you with a loaf and a few coins, and though you appreciate the gesture, you know your night has only just started. You continue through torchlit streets where fear hangs thicker than fog. People whisper from windows as you pass, treating you with a mix of respect and superstition. Some believe rat catchers carry a curse. Others believe you are a savior. You are neither. You are simply someone who understands the enemy, who listens to the small, subtle sounds that others overlook. The scratch inside walls, the rustle beneath discarded cloth, the faint squeak that signals a nest nearby. At the old granary, the problem is far worse. Grain dust fills the air, catching the moonlight like silver mist. Wooden beams groan overhead, and small shapes dart along them like shadows with teeth. The granary keeper begs you to be careful. He is certain the infestation is on the verge of destroying the entire winter supply. You move cautiously, placing bait, setting traps, and navigating unstable walkways as rats swarm in hungry waves. Here, you work not as a hunter but as a strategist, outsmarting creatures who survive by cunning alone. By the time you finish, hours have passed. Your arms ache, your lungs burn with the scent of dust and decay, and your sack is heavier than ever. But the town sleeps a little safer because of you. As dawn begins to glow faintly behind the rooftops, you head home, exhausted, sore, and oddly proud. You know tomorrow night the hunt will begin again. But this is your role in the great, grinding machine of medieval life, an unseen protector, fighting an endless war in the shadows. Night settles over the medieval town like a damp woolen cloak, heavy, humid, carrying the stench of refuse, stagnant water, and the unmistakable sour metallic odor of illness spreading through the districts. As a professional rat catcher, the deepening darkness is not a signal for rest, but the moment your true work begins. By day, you scout, plan, negotiate, listen to rumors. By night, you navigate the underbelly of the city, entering spaces where others refuse to step. The shadows belong to you as much as to the creatures you hunt. Tonight feels particularly alive, as if the city itself is holding its breath. You prepare your gear in the cramped corner of your workshop. An assortment of wooden traps, spring-loaded jaws, metal-reinforced cages, and pouches filled with pungent bait made from rendered fat mixed with bits of dried fish. You slide a narrow lantern onto your belt, carefully shielding its glass so the flame won't extinguish when you crawl through tight spaces. Finally, you tie your leather mask around your face, not the beak doctor mask used by plague physicians, but a simple piece to filter the dust, spores, and filth you stir up in the dark. Before stepping outside, you pause to observe the streets from your doorway. Torches flicker at intervals, creating pools of dim gold broken by long walls of blackness. Town guards patrol in pairs, their spears glinting faintly. You hear dogs barking, a baby crying in the distance, and the rhythmic clack of a carpenter's hammer still working somewhere despite the hour. Life goes on, even as disease creeps through the alleys like an invisible serpent. But the rats, your rats, are thriving. The first place you go is the tannery district, where piles of discarded hides rot behind shaded sheds. The workers have already retired, and the quarter smells of lime pits and decaying flesh. You crouch beside an overturned barrel and tap twice on its side. Sure enough, a soft scuttling sound responds. You lift the lid to reveal a cluster of black rats chewing on rancid scraps. With a practiced motion, you lower a cage, baited with the irresistible fish paste. It takes less than a minute before you hear the sharp click of the trap's door snapping shut. You mark the cage with chalk, noting both the location and the number caught, documentation that guild officials require, especially now that the spread of infection has placed your profession in critical importance. From the tannery, you move toward the grain warehouses. These are the lifeblood of the city, and thus the epicenter of rat activity. Thick wooden doors bar entry, but you know the secret gaps, warped boards, loose planks, forgotten drainage holes. You slip inside through a crack behind a stack of old crates, grateful that no guard is nearby to accuse you of theft or trespassing. Once within, you kneel and listen. Rats make many sounds, the whisper of tiny claws, the soft gnawing of teeth against wood, the squeaks marking dominance fights. Tonight, the warehouse is pulsing with them. You set 3 traps along the lower rafters, balancing on a beam as you work. Dust rains down as a group of rats scurries along a ridge, brushing your boots. You maintain your balance, lowering a cage near their path. But as you do, something catches your attention. A half-eaten sack of barley covered in small blood droplets. You examine it closer. The blood is fresh, still sticky. This means something bigger is prowling, perhaps a massive buck rat, one of the dominant, aggressive males that often carry the fleas responsible for transmitting the plague. You track the blood trail to a dark corner where several barrels lean against a stone wall. Your lantern reveals a thick-bodied rat perched atop a coil of rope, its eyes glowing a menacing red reflection in the lamplight. It hisses, baring yellow teeth. Your heartbeat quickens, not out of fear, but excitement. These large males are the most valuable. Their removal significantly slows breeding and disease spread. You advance slowly, careful not to spook it. Then, at the right second, you whip your net forward. The rat lunges, nearly slipping past, but the net's weighted edge strikes the ground, trapping it beneath. It shrieks and thrashes, but you've done this 1,000 times. You secure it quickly and place it in the reinforced cage, designed for larger prey. As you leave the warehouse, hauling your heavy load, a guard approaches. He nods with a mixture of respect and unease. "Another night's harvest?" he asks. You shrug. "Enough to keep the grain safe for now." He grimaces. "People say the sickness is worse this week." You tighten your mask. "Then we'll need to work faster." You continue to the river embankments, where a rotting market waste collects near the docks. Rats swarm in these places, but the danger is greater too. The water is foul, the boards slick, and petty thieves lurk in the dark. Still, the pay is good. Merchants desperately want their goods protected from contamination. As you walk along the pier, you spot a group of dockhands huddled around a barrel fire. They call you over. "Ratcatcher, we heard noises in the fish warehouse, big ones. Can you take a look?" You agree and follow them. The warehouse reeks of salt water, brine, and oily residue from smoked fish. Your lantern reveals movement between the racks. Rats bolt in every direction, disturbed by your presence. You mutter under your breath. Too many for simple traps. This requires smoke. You gather a handful of dried herbs from your pouch, place them in a small clay pan, and light them. A dense, bitter-smelling cloud fills the lower half of the room, driving the rats upward and outward into the open. The dockhands shout in surprise as dozens burst from cracks in the wall. You chase after the stragglers, netting several large ones and capturing others with snap traps you quickly placed earlier. By the time you finish, your lungs burn slightly from the smoke and your arms ache from the exertion. But the work is far from over. There remains one final stop tonight. The abandoned monastery on the hill, once a place of learning and worship, now a silent rotting shell where plague victims were temporarily stored during the last outbreak. The townsfolk avoid it, fearing ghosts or the lingering breath of death. But you go because rats thrive in forgotten places. The path leading to the monastery is overgrown with weeds. The moon hangs low, illuminating the broken stone pillars and shattered stained glass windows. Inside, the air smells of mold and old incense. You tread carefully, mindful that the floorboards are weak. Your lantern reveals deep claw marks on the pews, droppings near the altar steps, and gnawed parchment scattered across the floor. The rats here are bold. You can sense it from the way they move, unhurried, confident. You climb the narrow stairs to the bell tower, where the wind whistles through the missing panes. Here, a large nest sits beneath the collapsed rafters, a writhing knot of squeaking bodies. You feel a chill crawl down your spine. Not fear. Recognition. This is a breeding hub. If left unchecked, the infestation would explode within weeks. With determination, you unload your largest trap, a collapsible wooden contraption designed to handle dozens at once. You set it with care, spreading bait across the inside. Then you descend the stairs, waiting at a distance. It doesn't take long. Once the smell spreads, the nest stirs. A flood of rats pours out, drawn by the scent. Within minutes, the trap door slams shut, the impact echoing like a hammer strike through the empty hall. You breathe a slow sigh of triumph. This is the kind of catch that could earn you a full week's wages. Exhausted but satisfied, you begin your long walk back home. The streets are quieter now, except for the occasional cart carrying away the bodies of the sick. You stop to watch for a moment, the silent procession illuminated only by torchlight. You tighten your grip on your lantern. What you do each night is grim, dirty, relentless, but without rat catchers, the city would fall into disease, famine, and chaos within a month. You continue onward, your shadow long and thin against the cobblestones. Rats will always return, but so will you. The city sleeps unaware of the invisible battle taking place beneath its floors and behind its walls, but you are its unsung shield, fighting an enemy no one wants to see. And dawn, as always, is only a few hours away. The first light of dawn barely touches the highest roofs, a pale gray that struggles against the lingering darkness. Your boots echo softly on the empty cobblestones as you make your way toward the center of town. The streets are deserted, but signs of the night's battle remain. Overturned barrels, scattered scraps of food, and the faint squeak of rats retreating into hidden corners. Your traps, collected from warehouses and docks, rattle gently in their cages, reminders of a night spent in relentless pursuit. At the marketplace, you pause to examine the goods left behind. Flour sacks burst slightly, grain spilled across the planks, evidence of both rat activity and human haste. You take note mentally of areas that need reinforced traps, corners that are especially prone to infestation. Your work is never done. Even as the city sleeps, the rats plot their next moves. Moving toward the blacksmith's quarter, you notice a family cautiously emerging from a side street. They nod briefly at you, a gesture of respect tinged with unease. You have become a figure of quiet authority in the city, a necessary shadow, one who exists at the border between survival and decay. Children peer from behind doorways, curious yet wary, recognizing the mask and the lantern but unsure whether to approach. The air grows warmer as the sun rises higher. Smoke from chimneys curls lazily into the sky, mingling with the scent of charred wood and baking bread. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howls at the morning, breaking the fragile calm. You pause for a moment, adjusting the leather straps of your mask, feeling the lingering ache in your arms and back from the night's exertions. Each step is measured. Even fatigue cannot slow your vigilance. Your final stop is the city granary, a massive stone building that has seen countless infestations. You approach quietly, assessing the walls and entryways, noting gaps in the masonry and small openings where rats have slipped in before. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of grain and mildew, the faint scratching of rodents already beginning their morning routines. You set traps with care, using both bait and ingenuity to ensure maximum efficiency. Every placement, every adjustment is deliberate. Mistakes here could allow the infestation to spiral out of control. As you exit the granary, you glance back at the town square. Market stalls are beginning to awaken, vendors calling to one another, merchants preparing for another day of trade. Life is resuming its ordinary rhythm, oblivious to the nightly battle waged beneath the streets and behind closed doors. And yet, you know it continues. The rats will return, the traps will need resetting. The disease will lurk quietly in dark corners. You take a deep breath, letting the cool morning air fill your lungs. The city is waking, fragile yet enduring. And though your hands are tired and your back aches, there's a grim satisfaction in knowing that for now, this part of the city is safer. The plague slightly slowed, the grain protected. You lift your lantern one last time, extinguish the flame, and tuck it into your satchel. The sun climbs higher, casting long shadows over stone and timber. You begin the long walk home, your mind already planning the evening's patrols, the streets you must revisit, and the corners that demand your attention. Your work is endless, unglamorous, and unseen by most. Yet in this hidden struggle, you carry the weight of life itself, a silent guardian in a city teetering between order and decay. The day has begun, but for you, the fight never truly ends. The city's morning hum rises gradually, a rhythm of labor and commerce. Yet for you, it carries an undertone of caution. Streets once dark and threatening now reveal the aftermath of last night's hunts, paw prints etched into soft earth, smudged soot marks on door frames, and tiny scraps of food scattered as unintended breadcrumbs. You move deliberately, scanning alleyways, barrels, and doorways, mentally noting every weak corner, every hidden nook where rats may have escaped your traps. Even in daylight, you cannot afford complacency. Nature does not rest, nor do vermin, nor the disease they carry. Your first stop is the butcher's district, where early light glints off cleavers and knives left out for preparation. Piles of discarded bones and offal make ideal feeding grounds for rats if left unchecked. You crouch in shadow near a side passage, examining the refuse heaps carefully. Here, cleverness and patience are your allies. A small trap placed too hastily or without cover may be ignored. Too obvious, and it may be disturbed by stray animals or humans. You balance a cage behind a broken wheelbarrow, baiting it with a mixture of dried fish and lard, and leave a subtle marking in chalk for later retrieval. Every detail matters. From the butchers, you navigate to the bakeries. The scent of fresh bread mingles with the lingering stench of yesterday's fallen scraps. Children chase one another along the narrow streets, oblivious to your passing, their laughter slicing through the heavier tones of the city. You pause to watch them, noting how life continues even amid decay. A fleeting smile touches your face. Their joy is fragile, yet persistent, a quiet reminder of a world that survives despite plague and vermin alike. But duty calls swiftly. Behind the bakeries, an alley leads to a storage cellar long abandoned. Its doors hang crookedly, hinges rusted. You push gently, and the soft squeak of rats scurrying in the darkness greets you. You set traps with methodical precision, counting each step. The larger rats, dominant males, are aggressive. They test traps, circle your feet, and retreat, calculating. You must match them in cunning. It is a delicate dance between predator and prey, one that requires both observation and patience. Each catch, each secured rat, is a small victory in an unending campaign. By mid-morning, the sun has risen high enough to warm the rooftops and dry the streets slightly. You carry cages stacked carefully, moving toward the docks to meet with merchants and warehouse keepers. The river's surface glints, the water flowing sluggishly, carrying traces of rotting fish and timber residue. Dockhands greet you warily, aware of your reputation. Some nod, others avert their gaze. The plague has sharpened superstitions. Some whisper that your presence alone keeps the sickness at bay, though none truly understand the work behind it. At the docks, the rat population is denser and more brazen. You methodically inspect barrels, crates, and rope coils, noting chewed corners and footprints. Today, a pair of unusually large black rats have been reported near the fish warehouse. Their aggression and size make them dangerous, both to your traps and potentially to any nearby humans if left unchecked. You prepare a net, reinforced cage, and a handful of pungent bait. As you set the traps, you feel the familiar surge of adrenaline, a mixture of focus, anticipation, and grim satisfaction. This is your battlefield, and victory is measured in survival rather than glory. Hours pass as you navigate the waterfront, moving from warehouse to warehouse, sometimes crouching for long minutes, listening to the soft rustle of paws, the faint squeak that signals presence. You note patterns, which rats travel in packs, which seem solitary, and which are bold enough to investigate new smells immediately. Knowledge is your weapon. Instinct is your shield. Each capture reduces the breeding potential of the colony, delaying the inevitable spread of disease and keeping the city marginally safer. By mid-afternoon, fatigue begins to weigh on your shoulders. The sun has climbed fully, burning through the morning haze, and the shadows are shorter now, less forgiving. You find a quiet corner near a tavern to eat a simple meal. Bread, cheese, and a few dried herbs to mask the lingering odor of vermin. As you chew, you listen. Merchants argue over prices. Carts rumble along cobblestone, and distant hammers strike at construction work. Life continues unabated, indifferent to the risks beneath its foundation. Your next assignment takes you to a series of narrow residential alleys, where refuse piles have grown unchecked. Rats thrive in such places, hidden under barrels, in broken carts, and inside hollowed walls. Children peer from upstairs windows as you set your traps, curious and slightly frightened by the masked figure methodically bending over debris. You move carefully, aware that one wrong step could bring a trap down on your own hands or alert a stray dog. Patience guides every movement. Experience dictates each choice. Even as the day wears on, your thoughts wander. The city is a complex organism, teeming with both human and animal life, each interaction connected in ways invisible to most. You reflect on the nights spent crawling through dark warehouses, the dangers faced when confronting aggressive rats, and the satisfaction of knowing that your work keeps grain safe, prevents the spread of disease, and protects the vulnerable who cannot fight for themselves. This awareness drives you forward, sustaining your body and sharpening your focus. By late afternoon, you climb toward the monastery on the hill. Though abandoned, it remains a crucial battleground for rat control. Its broken windows and collapsed roof create complex pathways for vermin, demanding ingenuity and trap placement. You explore the interior carefully, setting multiple traps across different floors. The smell is intense here. Mold, decay, and faint remnants of incense mix in the stagnant air. Each rat caught in this area feels like a significant victory, not just for survival, but for the city's fragile equilibrium. As evening approaches, the sky shifts to muted gold and deepening violet. You retrieve traps, tally catches, and make detailed notes for future planning. Despite exhaustion, there's a quiet satisfaction in the progress made. The night will bring new challenges, but today's work ensures a temporary reprieve. The streets, docks, and warehouses stand a little safer. The rats' breeding cycles have been interrupted, and merchants will sleep easier, at least for a while. Finally, you begin the trek home, the city now bathed in the soft light of dusk. The streets are quieter, shadows lengthen, and the smells of evening cooking mix with the ever-present scent of decay. Your body aches from hours of crouching, lifting, and navigating hazardous terrain, yet a sense of purpose steadies your steps. The work is relentless, unglamorous, and largely unseen, but the city would crumble without it. As you reach your small home tucked between two narrow buildings, you pause for a moment to look back. The river glints faintly, smoke rises from chimneys, and the city hums with life, oblivious to the nightly war waged beneath its feet. You tighten the straps of your mask, still damp with sweat, and make a mental plan for tomorrow. The bakeries, the warehouses, the docks, the alleys. Every corner holds potential threats, and every night will demand vigilance. Inside, you lay down your gear carefully. The traps, lantern, and bait are cleaned, repaired, and ready for another day. You finally remove your mask, letting your face breathe after hours of tension and concentration. The sun sinks lower, and for a brief moment, you allow yourself to rest, knowing that even this short reprieve is earned through skill, patience, and sheer determination. Though the city seems serene, you know better. Rats are clever. Plague lingers, and chaos waits in hidden corners. Your work is endless, a cycle of observation, action, and strategy. And yet, in this constant struggle, there is purpose, mastery, and quiet triumph. The unseen victories of a professional rat catcher, safeguarding a city that will never fully understand the weight carried in shadowed streets and silent warehouses. By the time the sun dips low, casting long, trembling shadows across the uneven cobblestones, the city begins its subtle transition from the vibrant chaos of daytime to the tense, measured rhythm of evening. You move through the streets with deliberate care, your lantern swaying slightly with each step, illuminating broken barrels, discarded refuse, and the faint outlines of rats scurrying back to hidden corners. The faint scent of cooking fires mingles with the lingering odor of decay, a constant reminder that life and death coexist in the alleys you patrol. Your first stop is the Apothecary District, a narrow maze of shops with overhanging signs and cluttered windows. Herbs hang from rafters, dried and fragrant, but the back alleys behind each store are perfect breeding grounds for vermin. You crouch near a pile of rotting vegetable matter, carefully placing a small trap baited with fish paste. The rats are cautious here, alert to any human presence. You remain still, muscles tense, waiting for the faintest sound, a soft scuff, a twitching tail, a tiny squeak, to confirm the trap's success. Each small victory is cataloged mentally, locations marked for later reinforcement. From the Apothecary District, you make your way toward the Textile Quarter, where cloth merchants display vibrant bolts of fabric in sunlight. By evening, however, the streets behind the shops are empty and dimly lit. You slip past shuttered windows and through narrow passageways, checking under carts and behind barrels. Rats here are smaller, more numerous, and remarkably bold. Some attempt to steal bait directly from the traps, testing your patience and precision. You adjust placement and weight, your hands steady despite the creeping fatigue. Observation and adaptation are your constant companions in this work. In one alley, you pause near a small fountain, watching a family of black rats dart in and out of broken stones. One particularly large specimen, a dominant male, sniffs at the trap but hesitates. You remain motionless, heart steady, until finally the rat ventures fully into the cage. The soft click of the trap door is music to your ears, a quiet triumph in the city's ongoing struggle. Nearby, a cat stretches lazily, indifferent to your work, but serving as an accidental aid by keeping minor intruders at bay. As twilight deepens, you shift toward the warehouse district near the river. Dock workers prepare to leave, carts laden with goods for distant markets. The air here is damp, smelling faintly of salt, rotting fish, and tarred ropes. You approach the warehouses cautiously, noting gaps in planks and weak doors. Inside, the shadows are thick, punctuated by scuttling and squeaks. Rats emerge in waves, some bold enough to investigate your lantern's glow, others retreating into cracks. You place multiple traps strategically, balancing immediate capture with long-term population control. A sudden movement draws your attention, a shadow larger than any rat. A fox, perhaps, or a feral dog, prowls along the edge of a dock. You pause, assessing the threat, knowing that even small predators can disrupt the delicate balance you maintain in the warehouses. Adjusting your position, you continue with meticulous care, setting bait and repositioning traps. Each movement is deliberate, every step calculated, because a single mistake could undo hours of effort or alert the vermin to your presence. By late evening, the sun has disappeared entirely, leaving the city bathed in the cold silver of moonlight. You navigate narrow streets toward the old monastery, a place avoided by townsfolk, where rats thrive in both number and audacity. Broken pews, collapsed roof sections, and debris create complex paths for them to traverse. Here, your work becomes both physical and psychological. You must anticipate their behavior, predict their movements, and respond instantly. With careful placement of your largest traps, you begin a quiet, relentless culling, securing dozens of rats in reinforced cages. The air is thick with the scent of mold and decay, and the soft scuttling echoes ominously through the empty halls. Even as you finish, exhaustion threatens to slow your movements, but discipline keeps you upright. You methodically check each trap, record each catch, and note locations for future rounds. The city remains largely unaware of the nightly war fought in its shadows, yet its safety hinges on your diligence. Every captured rat is a small victory against disease, starvation, and the creeping chaos that threatens life in this medieval town. On your walk back home, lantern swinging, you reflect on the day's efforts. The city's sounds are muted now. Footsteps echo, distant dogs bark, and somewhere a cart wheels along uneven cobblestones. You adjust your mask, feeling the leather chafing slightly against your skin, a constant reminder of both protection and burden. Despite fatigue, a quiet satisfaction fills you. The streets are safer, grain stores preserved, and the risk of plague slightly mitigated. Yet you know the cycle will begin again tonight, tomorrow, and the nights after that. A ceaseless struggle between unseen forces and a single vigilant guardian. Finally reaching your modest home tucked among narrow alleys, you carefully unload your cages and lantern. You remove your mask, breathing freely, and set your traps for cleaning and repair. The soft evening breeze brushes against your face as you gaze toward the distant monastery, its silhouette etched against the moonlit sky. Tomorrow will demand the same vigilance, the same meticulous attention, and the same quiet courage. In this endless cycle, you are the unseen shield, the silent protector of a city that will never fully comprehend the scope of your labor. The vermin will return, the disease will linger, and the shadows will continue to conceal threats unseen by ordinary eyes. But for now, in this brief, fragile interval between day and night, you allow yourself a moment of stillness, a fleeting acknowledgement that your work matters. The city sleeps, unaware of the battles fought beneath its streets and in the alleys, yet in its slumber, it is safer for your unseen, tireless vigilance. Night begins to deepen across the city, and a heavy silence settles over the streets that had only hours ago been bustling with merchants, children, and laborers. The market squares are empty, except for scattered refuse and a few stray animals, the remnants of the day's commerce. You move through this deserted cityscape with the careful precision of someone who knows that danger, though invisible, is never far. The lantern swings from your hand, casting narrow beams of light on the uneven cobblestones and highlighting small movements that might otherwise go unnoticed. Each shadow is a potential hiding place, each sound a signal. Your first stop is the old tannery near the river, where the scent of soaking hides has lingered for decades. The daylight has long faded, and the buildings now appear more like silent sentinels than workplaces. You kneel to examine the ground, noting scuff marks, droppings, and footprints. The larger rats here are bold, accustomed to human avoidance, and their cunning makes them dangerous opponents. You set multiple traps with care, each strategically positioned to intercept their usual pathways. Even now, you observe patterns in their movements, calculating how they will respond to your placements, anticipating hesitation, and preparing contingencies. From the tannery, you make your way toward the granaries that loom along the riverfront. The massive stone structures are shadowed and foreboding in the moonlight. Rats swarm in these places, their movements almost imperceptible in the dim glow of your lantern. Here, patience is critical. A sudden motion could scatter the colony, forcing hours of wasted effort. You crouch behind crates, silent as a cat, repositioning a baited trap that one particularly cautious rat has ignored several times. When it finally ventures close enough, you spring the mechanism, a satisfying click echoing softly in the emptiness. Each successful capture feels like a small victory, a temporary reprieve for the city's fragile food supply. As you leave the granaries, a distant clatter draws your attention. Two guards pass along the street, torches held high, their presence both a reassurance and a potential risk. You flatten against the shadowed wall, letting them pass without drawing notice. Even at this late hour, vigilance is essential, not only for the rats, but for humans whose misunderstanding or suspicion could compromise your work. This dual awareness defines your life, a constant negotiation between seen and unseen, between danger and duty. Next, you move through the narrow residential alleys, where the stench of refuse and human waste is strongest. Here, rats are aggressive, accustomed to the maze of buildings, barrels, and broken carts. Some are bold enough to investigate your lantern directly, their red eyes glinting in the light. You move slowly, setting traps behind overturned barrels, inside hollowed walls, and beneath loose floorboards. Observation is as important as action. Each subtle twitch, each whispered squeak, informs your next placement. You work methodically, your body tired but your mind sharp, cataloging each corner's vulnerabilities for later inspection. Midnight approaches, and you take a brief pause near a small fountain in a deserted courtyard. The water glints faintly under the moonlight, and you allow yourself a moment to listen. The city sleeps unevenly. A dog barks in the distance, a shutter rattles in the wind, and somewhere, a child coughs, perhaps sick, perhaps dreaming. The weight of responsibility presses upon you. Every missed rat is a potential outbreak, every unmonitored alley a vector for disease. Yet in this stillness, there is clarity. The city may not understand your work, but it relies upon it entirely. Your final destination is the abandoned monastery on the hill, a place avoided by all but the most determined. Broken windows, collapsed pews, and scattered remnants of old prayers make it a perfect breeding ground for the city's largest and most aggressive rats. You climb the crumbling stairs cautiously, aware that the floorboards may not support your weight. The smell here is pungent, mold, decay, and the faint trace of incense linger, mingling with the unmistakable odor of vermin. You place traps carefully, weighting them and baiting them with precision. The rats respond predictably, moving in waves as the scent reaches them. Each trap is sprung in succession, and soon dozens of rats are secured in your reinforced cages. The task is exhausting, yet immensely satisfying. This location, if left unchecked, could have become an uncontrolled hub for disease. By the early hours of the morning, exhaustion sets in. Your back aches, your arms tremble slightly, but the city remains safer because of your efforts. You begin the long walk home, lanterns swinging gently, cages rattling softly with the captured rats. The streets are quiet now, eerily so, and the moon casts long, distorted shadows across stone and timber. You think of the city sleeping, oblivious to the unseen battles fought nightly, and a mixture of satisfaction and melancholy fills you. This work is lonely, relentless, and often thankless, but it is essential. Without it, famine and plague would spread unchecked. Finally, you reach the small doorway of your home, tucked between two narrow buildings. You carefully unload the cages, setting them aside for later release or relocation, and place the lantern in a secure corner. Your mask is removed, and for the first time in hours, you inhale deeply, savoring the fleeting taste of fresh air. You make a note to revisit key areas tomorrow: the tannery, the granaries, the alleys, and the monastery. Every night, the cycle repeats, but each day provides new insight, new strategies, and renewed vigilance. As dawn creeps over the horizon, painting the city in pale, tentative light, you allow yourself a brief rest. Sleep is necessary, even if it comes lightly and interrupted by worry. For the rats, the plague, and the chaos beneath the streets will not pause. Yet for now, the city survives another night, and you have once again proven your worth as its silent guardian. Your work is relentless, unseen, and indispensable, a quiet, unsung defense against the darkness that thrives in corners where ordinary eyes do not look. Whose section? Onskain parallel using Lukta, 1000 Kalaim Artarildi. Farkler McCandler v. Yenialer. Apothecary District, Textile Quarter, Residential Alleys, Docks, Abandoned Monastery, City Squares, and Fountain Areas. Gunnan C. Sattlery v. Gase, Baslangisai at Mosfrey and Satildi. Karakterin Strategillery, Goslam Larry. Ixel Dussen Celery Detail Anderildi. Isterson BU Section Isen 5 Farkley Son Userinden AI Gorsel Prompt Larry Hazalea Billarum. Ansiki Balamler Yaptigimus Jibby. Vuna Yapmami Istamissen. The city's night has grown heavier, its silence deeper, as I make my way through the twisting alleys toward the eastern quarter, a district less traveled and often forgotten. Here, the buildings lean toward each other as if conspiring in shadowed whispers, and the cobblestones are uneven, slick with moisture from the evening mist. Every step requires attention. One misstep could leave me sprawling, alerting both rats and any human presence that my work is underway. Lantern light dances along the walls, illuminating the faint scurrying of vermin as I navigate. In this quarter, the rats are particularly cunning. They have learned to avoid the usual traps, slipping through cracks, darting behind loose stones, and disappearing into holes in the walls that only I seem to know about. I kneel by a pile of discarded timbers and carefully set a series of interlinked spring traps, baited with a mixture of dried fish and rendered fat. The placement requires precise calculation. A single mistake could allow dozens of rats to escape, threatening nearby granaries and spreading disease. My eyes trace the faint tracks in the dust, anticipating the paths the rats will take, predicting their movements as though playing a chess game in the dark. From here, I move toward the old tannery once more, a place that smells strongly of lime and fermented hides even in the cold night air. The larger rats here are territorial, often attacking smaller competitors and testing any intruder for weakness. I approach cautiously, listening for the faintest rustle, adjusting my traps in response to every sound. The floorboards creak beneath my weight, sending shivers through my spine. I pause, taking careful note of shadows and shapes, understanding that patience is the key to capturing the most valuable targets. A particularly large male rat emerges from the corner of a crate, its fur matted and eyes gleaming red in my lantern's glow. I wait, still as stone, then spring the trap at the exact moment. It snaps shut, securing the rat with precision. Satisfied, I move on to the textile quarter, where narrow streets and tightly packed buildings create labyrinthine routes. The scent of wool, dye, and lingering oils mix with the smell of decay, a stark reminder that life and death exist side by side in these alleys. I check previously set traps, noting which were successful and which need adjustment. Some rats have escaped, but most are captured, their numbers dwindling thanks to careful planning and constant vigilance. As I move between alleys, I hear distant shouts, perhaps a drunk arguing with a neighbor, perhaps children playing despite the lateness of the hour. I pause, listening, ensuring that my presence is unnoticed, and continue my rounds with the practiced stealth that has become second nature. By the river docks, the air is thick with the scent of brine and fish oil. The boards are slick, and the occasional loose plank threatens to betray my presence. I set traps along the edges of the warehouses, near barrels of salted fish and crates of goods. Rats swarm here more aggressively, driven by both hunger and the cover of darkness. I carefully spread bait in a pattern that forces the rats into my cages, using the landscape itself, the barrels, planks, and ropes, to channel them efficiently. The work is physically demanding, but the mental strain is even greater. I must anticipate every move, remain vigilant to the unforeseen, and react instantly to any misstep from either rats or humans. Finally, I make my way to the abandoned monastery, which rises on the hill like a skeleton against the pre-dawn sky. Broken arches, collapsed roof sections, and decaying walls provide perfect habitats for large numbers of vermin. I climb carefully into the bell tower, placing my largest trap beneath the thick layer of rotting beams. Moonlight mixes with the faint dawn glow, illuminating the interior in ghostly blues and silvers. Rats begin to stir, drawn toward the trap, and I wait patiently, adjusting the net and observing their behavior. When the first surge of movement triggers the mechanism, dozens of rats are captured at once, a triumph achieved only through meticulous planning and relentless attention. Exhausted, I descend, taking a moment to survey the city from this high vantage. The streets are nearly silent, only the occasional crowing of a distant rooster or the soft clatter of a cart in the distance punctuating the night. I reflect on the night's work. Hundreds of rats captured, critical areas secured, yet the knowledge that tomorrow will demand the same effort weighs heavily. Each night is a blend of strategy, endurance, and constant adaptation. The city may sleep, oblivious to the invisible threats below its feet, yet its survival depends on unseen efforts like mine. Finally returning home, I unload the cages, tending to the traps and preparing them for the next night. Lantern light flickers across the walls of my small workspace as I take a moment to breathe deeply, feeling the physical toll of the night's labor. My mind races with thoughts of which districts need more attention, which rats proved cleverest, and which strategies might yield better results tomorrow. Even in exhaustion, there is satisfaction, a quiet acknowledgement that my vigilance has kept the city safe for another night. As dawn stretches over the rooftops, painting the city in tentative light, I allow myself a brief rest. My lantern is extinguished, traps secured, and my thoughts turn to the next day, already planning routes and strategies in advance. For the rats, disease, and darkness never cease, and neither can my watch. The city's survival is temporary, fragile, yet it rests, for now, in my careful hands. By the time the morning fog begins to lift from the city's low-lying districts, the streets take on a muted hue, silvered by dew and pale sunlight filtering through narrow alleys. The rat catcher steps out once more, lantern in hand despite the dawn, for even daylight does not halt the work that must be done. Every corner of the city hides secrets, loose floorboards, forgotten cellars, and abandoned carts that serve as havens for the vermin population. With careful steps, he moves through the cobblestones, his eyes scanning for traces of movement, the faintest rustle of fur, the subtle imprints and dust that betray the nightly activities of the city's hidden creatures. The first stop is the marketplace, now quiet after the previous night's bustle. Scattered remnants of produce, barrels tipped over in haste, and stray scraps of meat litter the ground. Here, rats have thrived, exploiting both human negligence and the cover of darkness. He kneels beside a toppled cart, setting traps with deliberate precision. Each placement a calculated attempt to intercept the agile, wary creatures. A particularly large rat emerges from beneath a crate, its fur matted, eyes sharp and red in the morning light. With careful timing, he secures the trap, the small snap resounding softly, marking another victory in his silent battle. Moving from the market, he navigates toward the textile quarter, where tightly packed wooden homes and weaving shops create narrow, labyrinthine pathways. The scent of wool and dye mingles with the more pungent odors of damp refuse. Here, rats are both numerous and cunning, often darting in unpredictable patterns. He checks previous trap placements, noting which succeeded and which must be adjusted. Every rat accounted for is a small triumph, every missed opportunity a potential hazard. As he adjusts a baited trap beneath a loose floorboard, he catches sight of a merchant unlocking a shutter. Unaware of the creatures lurking below, he steps silently aside, preserving both the man's safety and his own secrecy. The docks are next, the water still dark and reflective beneath the early light. Boards slick with river residue glisten faintly, and the scent of brine and fish oil is pervasive. Large barrels and crates, remnants of the night's commerce, provide ideal cover for aggressive colonies of rats. He places traps strategically, drawing the creatures into controlled paths while minimizing escape. Smoke from a small herb pan curls lazily, nudging the vermin in the right direction. Dock workers linger at a safe distance, watching in silent fascination as he executes the delicate choreography of baiting, positioning, and capturing. Toward midday, he ascends to the higher residential districts, narrow streets lined with half-timbered homes leaning precariously against each other. Here, the rats are less aggressive, but equally abundant. He moves with care, observing shadowed corners, examining refuse piles, and checking cellar doors for signs of infestation. The quiet hum of the city's morning activities, hammering from construction, the distant braying of livestock, and the muted chatter of early laborers, intersects with the whispers of the rats beneath the floorboards. Every step is calculated, every sound analyzed. The work is as much mental as physical, requiring constant observation, strategy, and patience. Finally, he visits the monastery atop the hill, now bathed in the soft glow of morning. The skeletal remains of the once proud structure are home to some of the largest rats he has encountered, their numbers swelling in the empty halls and collapsed roof sections. He moves cautiously through the bell tower, placing his largest trap beneath a cluster of rotting beams. The rats respond as expected, drawn to the scent and positioned with precision. Within minutes, dozens are secured, a testament to meticulous planning and exhaustive experience. He pauses for a moment, taking in the view from the tower. The city sprawls below, its streets still and nearly silent, unaware of the unseen efforts maintaining its fragile equilibrium. Exhausted but determined, he descends, noting areas that will require extra attention in coming nights. Each district presents new challenges. Some traps need reinforcement, some alleys demand careful surveillance, and some buildings require stealthy entry. Yet the reward is the city itself, its survival dependent upon his vigilance. As the sun rises higher, illuminating rooftops and distant hills, he allows himself a brief respite, knowing that by nightfall, the streets will again require his careful scrutiny. This is the rhythm of his life, relentless, unseen, and crucial. Every rat captured, every colony controlled, and every infestation mitigated is a small triumph in the ongoing battle against disease and decay. The city may never recognize his efforts, but in its quiet survival, his work speaks volumes. And as he prepares to move once more through alleys and streets, lantern ready, traps in hand, he knows that every day, and every night, brings both danger and purpose, a constant reminder that the line between life and chaos is maintained by unseen guardians, such as himself. As the late morning sun climbs higher, the city begins to stir with more urgency. Merchants shout from their stalls, carts creak under heavy loads, and laborers hurry along the cobblestones, carrying sacks of grain and barrels of wine. Yet even amid this apparent bustle, my eyes and my senses remain attuned to what lurks unseen. Rats, disease, and the ever-present threat of filth continue to haunt the alleys, cellars, and warehouses that most citizens avoid or ignore. I move through the streets with the practiced caution of someone who has learned that visibility does not equate to safety. My first task of the day is to check the traps placed overnight in the textile quarter. Narrow alleys, the scent of wool, dye, and leftover refuse form a labyrinthine environment for the vermin. I move swiftly yet silently, inspecting each trap and noting successes and failures. Some rats have eluded capture, their cleverness reminding me that each night brings new challenges. I adjust the placement of bait, considering escape routes, sight lines, and the habits I have observed over countless nights. The work is exhausting, yet deeply methodical, a mental as well as physical test. From there, I navigate toward the food market district. Early morning merchants are just setting up, unaware that the remnants of last night's infestation still linger beneath their stalls. I weave between crates of vegetables, barrels of salted meat, and stacks of grain, checking hidden corners and narrow crevices where vermin congregate. Each rat caught represents a small victory, but every escapee is a potential threat to the delicate balance of hygiene and health that keeps the city alive. I take careful note of the areas that require additional traps, planning the evening's rounds even as sunlight warms my back. The river docks beckon next, the scent of salt water and fish oil mingling with the less pleasant odors of rot and mildew. Crates of smoked fish and barrels of brine create both cover and challenge, and the rats here are larger, more aggressive, and highly territorial. I carefully set traps along the edges of warehouses, balancing the need for efficiency with caution. A misstep could send a rat scurrying in the wrong direction, potentially triggering a chain reaction that overwhelms my carefully constructed strategy. I use a small pan of burning herbs to create a smoky barrier, guiding the rats toward the traps with practiced precision. The work demands endurance, attention, and constant adaptation. By mid-afternoon, I make my way to the eastern residential district. Narrow streets, leaning timber houses, and uneven cobblestones create a maze-like environment, perfect for the elusive vermin. I check for signs of activity, gnawed wood, droppings, and subtle tracks in dust or ash. Each discovery informs my decisions, where to place the next trap, which gaps in the buildings require temporary sealing, and which families may need advice on pest management. Occasionally, a curious child peers from a doorway, eyes wide as I move silently through the alleys. I offer a brief wave, careful not to distract myself or alarm the locals. Yet even small interactions remind me of the human dimension of this unseen labor. The abandoned monastery on the hill remains my most formidable challenge. Even in daylight, its skeleton-like walls and collapsed roof sections create a habitat for the largest rats, and its hidden passages allow them to evade capture easily. I ascend the bell tower carefully, placing a large trap beneath the rotting beams where the densest clusters gather. Sunlight filters through broken stained-glass windows, casting fractured colors across dust-laden floors. The rats respond predictably, drawn to the scent and careful positioning of bait. Within minutes, dozens are captured, the quiet snap of the trap punctuating hours of meticulous planning. Standing in the tower, I survey the city below. Streets bustle with life, yet oblivious to the invisible guardians like myself who labor unseen, ensuring safety and health. Returning to the docks, I check for any signs of resurgence. The smoke from the herb pan lingers faintly in the salty air, and stray rats occasionally reappear from hidden crevices. I set additional traps, reinforcing my efforts from earlier, and take note of patterns in behavior. The city is a living entity, its health maintained by vigilance, strategy, and relentless work that most citizens will never witness or comprehend. As evening approaches, I pause atop a modest hill, observing the city bathed in warm, golden light. The markets are quieting, taverns begin to hum with activity, and distant bells chime for evening prayers. I reflect on the day's efforts, traps placed and checked, vermin accounted for, and potential threats mitigated. Yet the work is never truly done. Each day and night brings new challenges, whether it be an unusually clever rat, a neglected alley, or a sudden outbreak of disease that must be contained before it spreads. My life is intertwined with the city's survival, each success measured not in applause, but in the quiet continuation of daily life. Finally, I return to my small workshop, tending to traps, repairing mechanisms, and preparing bait for the night ahead. Lantern light flickers across worn wooden tables and shelves lined with tools. I take a moment to breathe deeply, allowing the physical and mental strain to settle. Outside, the first stars appear as dusk falls, and I know that the city will soon demand my vigilance once again. Though unrecognized, my role is essential, a constant, unseen protector, guarding against threats that thrive in darkness. And as the first night begins to settle, I ready myself for the cycle to continue, aware that the survival of the city depends upon the unseen labor of those who move silently through its streets. The late afternoon sun slants through the narrow alleys, painting long shadows across the cobblestones. The city, alive with the noise of merchants packing away wares, children running along streets, and the clatter of carts returning to stables, seems ordinary to those who stroll without concern. Yet, beneath this ordinary surface, tension simmers like water just below boiling. My work, the relentless vigilance against rats, disease, and the hidden decay of the city, continues unabated. The sun's warmth does little to lift the sense of unease that settles deep within me, a reminder that every quiet moment may conceal a disaster waiting to unfold. I begin my rounds in the western quarter, an area recently hit by shortages of clean water and a surge in vermin activity. Narrow alleys wind between houses leaning precariously toward each other, their wooden beams warped by age and dampness. Trash piles, long neglected, provide the perfect breeding ground for rats. I crouch beside an overturned barrel, scanning the shadows for movement. My traps are carefully positioned, and my bait strategically placed to lure even the cleverest scavengers. Each rat captured is a small victory, yet each escapee gnaws at the fragile control I maintain over this quarter. News of illness has begun to spread faster here than in other districts. Families whisper in doorways, eyes wide with fear, while children clutch at their mother's skirts. I move silently past these households, offering advice on basic hygiene, how to store food, and where to place temporary barriers to reduce infestations. My presence is met with cautious relief. Many have seen me before, recognize my purpose, and understand the subtle authority that comes with relentless diligence. Despite this, an invisible pressure lingers. One cannot save everyone, and the knowledge of this truth weighs heavily on my mind. From the western quarter, I make my way to the merchant district near the river. The docks are bustling with the unloading of goods, the bark of traders, and the smell of fish, salt, and decaying refuse intermingling in the humid air. Rats, ever opportunistic, scurry along the shadows of crates and beneath the planks of the wharves. I set traps in strategic patterns, anticipating their movements, while occasionally consulting my maps and notes, meticulously maintained records of infestations, trap locations, and rat behavior patterns. The work demands foresight and adaptability. A moment of carelessness could allow entire colonies to escape into the city, creating potential outbreaks of disease. The late afternoon shadows deepen as I navigate back into the residential heart of the city. Here, the problems are both more subtle and more dangerous. Buildings have deteriorated from neglect, floors sag under rot, and hidden gaps provide refuge for both vermin and disease. I pause frequently, inspecting floorboards, peering into cellars, and noting structural weaknesses that could become deadly hazards in weeks or months. Families watch from windows, some curious, some fearful, all aware that my presence is both unusual and necessary. My hands are calloused, my clothes dirt-stained, but my mind remains sharp, calculating risks and adjusting plans with the precision of a master strategist. By early evening, I climb toward the abandoned monastery, a site that has become a nexus of vermin activity. Even in daylight, the sprawling ruins exude a sense of latent danger. Collapsed roofs, crumbling walls, and scattered debris create labyrinthine tunnels ideal for large colonies. I set multiple traps, baited and weighted to contain dozens of rats at once, and position myself at vantage points to monitor their responses. Shadows lengthen across the broken floors as the rats respond to the scent, emerging from hidden crevices in search of food. The first few are caught swiftly, yet I know the largest and most dangerous individuals lurk deeper within, their cunning honed by generations of survival. The rising tension in my chest is mirrored by the city below. From the monastery's vantage point, I observe the streets and rooftops bathed in the golden glow of dusk. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, children's laughter echoes faintly through alleyways, and merchants close their stalls for the evening. Yet for every moment of calm, there is another shadow, an unnoticed pile of refuse, a sagging floorboard, a hidden colony of rats poised to expand unchecked. My vigilance cannot waver. Each missed detail has the potential to escalate into chaos, disease, and widespread panic. Nightfall brings its own challenges. I descend into the lower districts where darkness reigns, lanterns swinging, eyes scanning for movement. The air grows colder and heavier, carrying the smell of wet stone, refuse, and distant smoke. Here, rats are bolder, emboldened by darkness, and humans are less visible, leaving gaps in observation that vermin exploit. I move with the same meticulous caution, setting traps and guiding the creatures into containment. Occasionally, I pause to watch their behavior. Hierarchies emerge, conflicts flare, and the most dominant individuals assert themselves in ways that remind me of the human world above. At the river's edge, I encounter a new challenge, a sudden surge of rats driven out from the warehouses by construction work and human activity. The swarm is larger than any I've encountered in recent nights, and I must adapt quickly. Using smoke from herbs and clever positioning of traps, I orchestrate their capture, directing their movements like a conductor leading a symphony. The physical exertion is immense, but my experience guides each action, ensuring success without unnecessary losses. By the time the last rat is secured, sweat drips from my brow, muscles ache, and lungs burn, yet I am driven by the knowledge that this is necessary work, essential to the survival of the city. Finally, I return to the monastery for a last check. Moonlight filters through shattered windows, illuminating the nests I have secured earlier and revealing subtle signs of remaining activity. A few rats scurry in the shadows, but my traps are set to intercept them. I make careful adjustments, ensuring that even the most cautious individuals will be caught during the night. Standing on the tower's edge, I look out over the city. Silent streets, shuttered windows, and the occasional flicker of torchlight marking human vigilance below. My own exhaustion is tempered by a sense of duty fulfilled, yet I know the work will begin anew as soon as darkness falls again. The city sleeps, unaware of the unseen war waged nightly in alleys, cellars, and ruins. Each trap, each captured rat, each strategic placement of bait contributes to a fragile equilibrium that sustains life above ground. My role is relentless, unsung, and crucial. A guardian whose labor protects not just property, but health, safety, and the continuation of daily life. And as the moon climbs high, illuminating rooftops and river, I prepare my lantern, gather my traps, and steel myself for another cycle of vigilance, knowing that in this city, peace is only ever temporary, and survival is the reward for those who see what others do not. Night has fully descended over the city, but sleep is a luxury I cannot afford. The streets are silent in appearance, yet filled with unseen activity. The rustle of rats in abandoned alleys, the distant groan of collapsing roofs, and the occasional shout of a citizen realizing the presence of vermin too late. Lantern in hand, I navigate the city's shadowed pathways with the precision of someone whose life depends on every careful step. The weight of responsibility presses upon me, heavier tonight than ever, for recent reports indicate outbreaks of both disease and pestilence are escalating faster than anticipated. My first stop is the eastern warehouses, where the mixture of humidity, decaying goods, and overcrowded storage spaces has created a perfect storm for vermin proliferation. I crouch behind crates, listening to the faint scuttling that betrays the movements of rats hidden from view. The largest individuals are bold, confident in their territory, and accustomed to evading even the most cunning traps. I deploy my devices meticulously, calculating trajectories, bait placement, and escape routes. Each movement is deliberate. A single misstep could allow an entire colony to escape and spread chaos through the district. From the warehouses, I move toward the residential alleys near the river. Families huddle within their homes, and the faint glow of candlelight through shuttered windows betrays their fear of the unseen. I pause at the entrance to one house, hearing the subtle cough of a child, a reminder that human vulnerability is as pressing as the threat of vermin. I offer advice on temporary barriers and sanitation measures, but each instruction comes with the bitter knowledge that even these precautions may not suffice. Disease travels faster than I can intercept it, and yet every attempt I make reduces risk, however slightly. The docks at night are a theater of shadows. Moonlight dances across the water, illuminating the uneven planks of the wharves and the looming stacks of barrels. Here, the rats are not only numerous, but cunning. I deploy smoke from dried herbs, guiding them toward traps I have carefully positioned. The hiss of trapped rats and the clatter of falling bodies fill the air, but I work steadily, muscles aching and lungs burning from the exertion. Each capture is a small victory, a temporary restoration of order in a city teetering on the edge of chaos. Returning through the western quarter, I encounter a sudden, unexpected surge. Construction work has disturbed previously hidden nests, sending waves of vermin into streets crowded with unaware citizens. I must improvise, repositioning traps and using smoke to herd the rats into confined spaces. The effort is exhausting, yet precise execution is critical. Even minor errors could result in a catastrophic infestation spreading across multiple districts. I move with a combination of physical agility and strategic thinking, coordinating movements of both trap and pest with almost mathematical precision. The abandoned monastery on the hill awaits, looming like a silent sentinel over the city. Its crumbling walls, shattered stained glass windows, and debris-strewn floors create the ideal habitat for the largest and most dangerous rats. I climb to the bell tower, lantern casting flickering light across the rotting wood and dust-covered stones. Setting the largest trap beneath the rafters, I wait with measured patience. Soon the nest stirs. Hundreds of rats, drawn by the scent and motion, flood into the device. The trap snaps shut with satisfying precision, but I know that this victory is temporary. More will come, bred from the very darkness I have illuminated tonight. By the time I descend, the city skyline is bathed in the pale glow of early dawn. Streets are quieter, save for the occasional carts carrying supplies and the distant toll of church bells marking the hour. My body aches with fatigue, muscles trembling from relentless effort. Yet the sense of duty that has guided me through countless nights remains unbroken. I return to my small workshop, tending traps, repairing mechanisms, and preparing for the next cycle. Even as exhaustion threatens to overwhelm me, I meticulously document each capture, each observed pattern of vermin behavior, and each adjustment I have made. Knowledge is as critical as action. It ensures that the invisible war waged nightly continues to favor the city's survival. Finally, as sunlight begins to peek over distant rooftops, I take a moment to observe the city from a high vantage point. Smoke rises from chimneys, the occasional merchant opens shutters, and the quiet rhythm of daily life resumes. I allow myself a brief exhale, a fleeting sense of accomplishment, but it is tempered by the certainty that this is only a temporary reprieve. The cycle of vigilance, observation, and intervention will continue without pause. And yet, in that quiet moment, I understand the magnitude of what has been achieved. The city sleeps, unaware of the battle waged in shadows, the countless lives safeguarded by unseen hands, and the endless commitment required to maintain order against relentless forces. My work is grim, unglorified, and perilous, but it is indispensable. As the first morning light glances off rooftops and the distant cry of a morning bird signals a new day, I prepare to descend once again into streets both familiar and treacherous. The night may be over, but the city's survival depends on those who see what others cannot, and I am one of them. Night has fully claimed the city, and the streets lie in deceptive silence. Yet beneath the stillness, life, and the struggle to preserve it, rages on. I move through the alleys with lantern in hand, each flicker of flame revealing hazards and threats invisible in the darkness. The chill in the air carries not only the damp of night, but also the stench of decay, rotting refuse, stagnant water, and the unmistakable odor of illness that has begun creeping through the lower quarters. Every step requires vigilance. Every glance scans for both rats and the human consequences of their presence. Tonight, the stakes feel higher than ever. The reports of widespread illness, famine, and hidden infestations have reached levels that cannot be ignored. I begin my rounds in the Eastern District, where narrow streets twist like a labyrinth and poorly maintained buildings provide perfect havens for vermin. Here, the smell of spoiled food and stagnant water is overpowering. I crouch beside a fallen cart, carefully setting a weighted trap in a shadowed nook. Even the smallest rat that escapes can mean disaster, for these creatures carry disease and breed exponentially in hidden corners. The faintest rustle prompts immediate action, and my practiced hands move with precision, balancing traps and bait as if conducting a dark symphony. From the alleys, I make my way to the bustling docks near the river. Moonlight glints off the water, illuminating the uneven planks and stacks of barrels. Rats, ever adaptive and cunning, dart through the shadows, challenging my patience and skill. I use smoke and strategic placement of traps to corral the largest individuals, orchestrating their movements like a general in battle. The clatter of falling bodies and the hiss of trapped rats echo through the night, mingling with distant sounds of water splashing against the quay and the faint cries of dockhands attending to last-minute tasks. My muscles ache, lungs burn, but I push onward. Failure here would risk entire warehouses being overrun. Moving further, I navigate the residential quarters, where fear is palpable even behind shuttered windows. Families whisper prayers, children cling to parents, and the faint coughs of the ill echo in the streets. I pause to advise households on emergency measures, securing food, constructing temporary barriers, and maintaining cleanliness to slow the spread of disease. Every conversation is a delicate balance between honesty and hope. I cannot promise safety, but I must offer guidance to mitigate the risks. Each interaction weighs heavily on me, Every warning I give carries the knowledge that I cannot be everywhere at once, and that unseen threats may still claim lives. The abandoned monastery looms ahead like a sentinel of decay. Its shattered windows, crumbling stone, and debris-strewn floors provide the ideal breeding ground for the most formidable rats in the city. I ascend the bell tower carefully, lantern illuminating the twisted shadows of broken pews and fallen beams. My largest trap is set beneath the rafters, calibrated to contain the swarming nest within. Soon movement stirs. Hundreds of rats surge from hidden crevices. The trap snaps with the satisfying finality of a plan executed correctly. Yet I know that this is only a temporary reprieve. These creatures, resilient and cunning, will return, and the cycle of vigilance must continue. Exhausted, I descend toward the central streets, muscles sore and vision dimming from hours of strain. Yet, even in fatigue, my mind calculates, evaluates, and adapts. A collapsed floorboard here, an exposed sack of grain there, a hidden nest in a corner. All must be noted for tomorrow's rounds. The city's fragile equilibrium depends on these small, unseen interventions. I stop briefly at a vantage point, observing the dim glow of torches and the occasional patrolling guard. The streets appear quiet, but I know that silence is a mask. Danger and disease move through the shadows, unseen and relentless. By the riverbanks, I am confronted with a new challenge. A surge of vermin displaced by construction in nearby warehouses. They are faster, larger, and more desperate than any I've encountered tonight. Improvisation becomes essential. I reposition traps, use additional smoke, and guide the swarm toward containment with all the energy I have left. My body trembles from exertion, but precision cannot falter. Every miscalculation could allow a new colony to spread, creating further crises throughout the district. Success here is measured in dozens of lives, human and animal alike, preserved from chaos. Finally, I return to my workshop as the first pale light of dawn begins to creep across rooftops. Lanterns dim, streets grow still, and the city awakens to a fragile sense of order. I tend to my traps, repair mechanisms, and record meticulous notes of the night's activity. Locations, numbers, and behavioral patterns. Exhaustion threatens to overtake me, yet the documentation ensures that my vigilance will persist, that each detail observed tonight informs the strategies of tomorrow. Standing atop the city walls, I gaze out over the rooftops and alleys, the sun casting long, pale shadows over streets still silent with early morning stillness. Smoke curls from chimneys, merchants prepare for the day, and the faint cries of early birds signal the start of life above. I allow myself a fleeting exhale, a small acknowledgement of survival accomplished, yet I know the city's respite is temporary. Tonight, the cycle will repeat. The streets will darken, vermin will emerge, and the unseen battle will begin anew. I am the city's unseen guardian, the silent arbiter between decay and order. Each night, I fight battles that no one witnesses, yet whose consequences determine life or death for thousands. My labor is ceaseless, my reward unacknowledged, yet my purpose is clear. The city's survival depends on those who see what others cannot, who act when others hesitate, and who bear the weight of vigilance through exhaustion, fear, and relentless adversity. As dawn spreads over the horizon, I pause one last time. My body aches, my mind spins with the endless calculations of risks and contingencies, but in this fleeting moment of quiet, I feel the magnitude of my work. The city sleeps, unaware of the peril that has been held at bay, yet safe, just for now, because I exist to do what others cannot, to see what others will not, and to endure what others cannot imagine. And when night falls again, the cycle will resume, relentless and unforgiving, but necessary. The first light of dawn creeps hesitantly over the uneven rooftops of the medieval town, stretching itself across wooden beams, crooked chimneys, and narrow stone alleys, still wet with night mist. Before most people wake, before the bakers fully heat their ovens, before merchants lift the wooden shutters of their shops, and long before nobles rise from their feathered mattresses, you are already awake. For you, a rat catcher by profession and necessity. The day begins not with calm or comfort, but with the lingering smell of stale hay, damp wool, and the faint musk of your own tools, traps, nets, and small wooden cages lined with metal grates. Your small room, tucked above a stable behind an apothecary's shop, receives almost no sunlight, so you rely on a dying tallow candle to illuminate your morning preparations. You stretch your stiff muscles, feeling the familiar ache in your shoulders, souvenirs from years of bending, crawling, and wrestling with the shadows that scurry across the town. You splash your face with cold water drawn from a barrel, and tie your hair back with the strip of worn cloth. There's no mirror, but you know what you look like. Eyes slightly sunken from too many nights spent in damp cellars, hands calloused from baiting traps, clothing patched and repatched in places that have worn thin from constant movement. As the candle flickers, you check your gear meticulously. Every tool has its place. The hand-woven net you repaired last night, your iron snapping traps, a small pouch of grain and cheese scraps used as bait, and a stout walking stick that doubles as a probe for dark corners. You also tuck away a leather-bound ledger, your record of houses cleared, barns inspected, and payments collected, though payments are rarely prompt and often disputed. Rat catching is a profession essential to all, respected by none. You can already hear faint squeaking from below the floorboards. The town is never silent. The rats never sleep. They thrive in the waste of taverns, the cracks in granaries, the abandoned corridors of wealthy estates, and the narrow drainage channels running beneath the cobblestone streets. Disease follows them like an invisible fog, and whether the townsfolk admit it or not, you are one of the thin, worn barriers standing between them and catastrophe. You grab the piece of dark cloth you sometimes use as a hood, useful for keeping soot and dust out of your hair, and step outside. The air is crisp, carrying the earthy scent of moisture, mixed with the faint aromas of bread baking, rotting straw, and horse manure. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, blending with the gray sky. The sun barely peeks over the horizon, and shadows stretch like long fingers across the narrow street. Your first task awaits at the southern end of town, where several barns have been reporting movement in the grain stores. You know what that means. The farmers don't want to say the word rat, believing it invites more misfortune. But you, who know the scratching sound of tiny claws better than the beating of your own heart, recognize the truth immediately. As you walk, townsfolk slowly emerge from their homes. Some give you polite nods mixed with discomfort. Superstition makes them avoid locking eyes for too long. Others cross the street entirely, holding their children close, as though your very presence carries the taint of the vermin you hunt. You've grown used to it. Respect in this town doesn't come to those who handle filth, even if it's a filth that keeps their lives from falling apart. Yet there are small comforts. The baker offers you the first warm crust of the day in exchange for clearing his flour storeroom last week. The old widow on the corner blesses you under her breath, whispering thanks to ward off misfortune. And above all else, there's a deep, quiet pride inside you, a knowledge that you do a job others fear too much to face. As the sun rises higher, you tighten your grip on your walking stick, breathe in the morning air, and begin your descent into another day. Another day of crawling through shadows, chasing whiskered phantoms, and confronting the hidden dangers that creep beneath the surface of medieval life. For a rat catcher, the day is never predictable, never clean, and never safe. But it is yours.